When I think of a haunted house, I am always whisked away to an old, derelict farmhouse in the woods. Creaky steps that lead up to a weathered wraparound porch. The paint peeling, exposing dry, splintered wood. Spiderwebs curtaining the window frames, while nature begins to take over the once austere home. I always think of a double-fronted door, adorned with beautiful carvings and stained glass. A heavy door knocker beckoning you to wake up the spirits inside. Within the home, it is obviously dark and foreboding. Musty air fills your lungs, while damp patches wallpaper the empty rooms. Of course, there has to be a rocking chair in the corner, ominously soothing itself with a rhythmic back and forth motion. Disembodied footsteps run up and down the treacherous ancient staircase, while from the corner of your eye, you spot a wisp of a white dress darting from room to room. And you mustn't forget the piercing shrill of a child's laugh from behind you. This is how I always imagine the stereotypical haunted house. And although those places do exist, most of the time, the paranormal takes place in very normal settings. And what makes a house haunted to begin with? Is it the land, the structure itself, or the items that you fill it with? What if the house itself isn't haunted at all? It may have all the markings of a haunted house, the poltergeist-like activity, the mysterious knocking, lights turning on and off, all the usual tropes. But sometimes, it isn't the house's fault at all. Sometimes it's the residents who are the afflicted ones. And when that's the case, getting to the bottom of a haunting becomes much, much more complex. Happy Halloween, and welcome to episode 26 of The West London Witch, a podcast where we share stories about those moments where we find ourselves very much not alone. We are very used to stories that have clear beginning, middles, and ends. And although today's episode has a strong origin and middle, the ending is certainly not what you would expect. Today, we are joined by our friends David and Chris from the Eastern Connecticut Paranormal Society. You probably remember them from Season 1, Episode 19, The Enfield Demon House. And they're back today to share with us one case that still haunts them to this day. So settle in for a journey to a normal home in a normal suburban neighborhood owned by a very normal couple, experiencing very abnormal activity. I'm Rebecca Strazina, and this is The West London Witch, Episode 26, The Vicious Cycle.
So I was actually on Reddit one day. At this time in my life, I was never really on it. I was just checking it out for the first time ever. And I had an account. I was looking at some paranormal threads, and some random guy messaged me out of the blue.
This is David, co-founder of the Eastern Connecticut Paranormal Society.
He's like, "Hey, I'm Aman. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Are you in Connecticut, or are you a paranormal investigator in Connecticut?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "I think I have a case for you." He said, I'm flying down next week. He said, can you join me and come to this house? So at first I was a little sketched out. I'm like, I don't know about this. Never met this guy before in my life, never heard from him. And sure enough, we ended up exchanging phone numbers. He flew over. I picked him up at the airport and we went over to this house. And the claim was that there was middle-aged couple and they were living in a raised ranch home in Windsor, Connecticut. And they were having a lot of problems with their technology. So what I mean is they would receive random emails, text messages from something. They would ping from each other's phones as if they were texting each other, but the text messages wouldn't appear on the other phone. So I originally thought BS. That's, there's got to be a record or something happening. And when I got there, I was able to look at some of the emails. They all came from anonymous, IP addresses, which I tried to trace and could not find anything. One of the emails that he got before, this was 3 days prior to me ever even hearing about this case, he received an email that said, ha ha ha, calling Paranormal Dave. And that was, to me, crazy, because if someone was faking this, how would they know that a guy from Seattle was going to reach out to me 3 days before I even talked to Aman in the first place? It's impossible.
These messages and emails were hurtful, mean, and wicked. They were secrets and skeletons that nobody knew about. Sometimes they were things not even the other spouse knew. It was obvious that these messages were sent to hurt one another, turn the couple against each other, and create hostility and division in the home. As upsetting as the malicious messages were, the torture did not stop there.
And other than that, they would be scratched. There were scratches and knocking on the walls. They would hear voices. They would see shadows, feel like they're being watched. He showed me a whole drawer full of laptops, cell phones, keyboards, you name it, that were all broken. So some of the cell phones had scratches on them, 3 scratches. The laptops were completely destroyed. And although I wasn't there to witness any of this happening, they claimed that they were going through laptops, cell phones, TVs in a matter of months. Every couple months they'd have to go buy new stuff because it would just keep breaking everything in the house. So when this gentleman and I went out there for the first time, when I first stepped foot in the door, it was just like the Enfield house, walking into a wave of energy. And it was super heavy. And I remember thinking something's not right. The couple was very nice. It just seemed like a regular home, but it just felt off. And maybe that was more of a intuitive, psychic inclination.
It's important to note that both Chris and David are mediums. David is a clairsentient medium, and Chris is a psychic medium. On this case, both of their gifts would be seriously put to the test.
Same day that David received a phone message from Aman, I woke up and drew a vision of a tunnel with a dark entity inside it and a woman in the forefront of it.
This is Chris, the other half of the Eastern Connecticut Paranormal Society.
Immediately knew that we were going to get a case and it wasn't going to be a good one.
We were told that they previously had about 6 paranormal teams come in. All of them were unsuccessful in removing or capturing evidence of this entity. And they had, I think, 2 or 3 priests come in and bless the home, again, unsuccessful. They had a shaman come in, unsuccessful. It got to the point where they actually had a ufologist come in thinking that maybe it's aliens. I mean, if none of the priests or shamans are working to remove something demonic or malevolent, maybe it's something else.
The team felt quite a responsibility to help this family out. So they wasted no time in getting straight to investigating.
First investigation, and we set up the nines. We had 8 cameras going, 1 in each room. We did sessions where we spread out to try to capture as much evidence as possible. We did group sessions, prayers, everything. We could not get a single shred of evidence that night. We sat there and went through, I don't know how many hours, over 40 hours of recordings, just staring at rooms and listening to dead air, no pun intended.
This was a frustrating moment for the team. They all agreed that the house felt off, but there was zero evidence to support that sentiment.
And we figured whatever's here is here, but it's hiding. So if something demonic is here, it wants us to think it's not, or it's going to hide itself behind possibly either a psychiatric illness. So it'll make us think that the clients are, crazy or exhibiting schizophrenic symptoms or something like that. Or it's going to make us turn on each other, which actually would come up later on in the case.
My first visit with Dave, when we concluded, I was getting just a vision of the chalice. And it was just 2 arms holding it up, almost like well played. Because we did some prayer that night. And that was the sense like, oh, well played, like he was toasting us or it was toasting us.
At this point, the team knew they needed to get creative. They had to think outside of the box and take a new approach. Whatever they were dealing with was intelligent, and it was playing with them.
So when we went back the second time, we decided to think outside the box and change up our game plan. So we were going to do a lot of religious provocation this time. The first time we didn't really use any because we didn't want to assume it was something it wasn't, and then stir more activity up. So we decided that one of us was going to be bait, and quite literally, I was chosen. So what we decided to do, we did what we call a tether line exercise. So one of us usually will go into an area of the home that is a very transient area, like a hallway, or somewhere where there's a lot of activity, and go into a deep meditation and try to bring the entity forward. Now, while one person's doing that, the other person is kind of at the other end of the hallway or nearby, and they're meditating as well. So in this case, I was sitting in the hallway, going into a deep meditation. Chris was at the other end of the hallway in the living room, meditating as well. Now, what we do is we both visualize an energetic tether line, and we keep this visualization the entire time. We are there to feel each other's energy and emotions, and if anything should go awry, then we can kind of pull each other out and keep each other safe spiritually. And it worked. So while I was in this meditation, again, at this point, there's really no activity happening. It's pretty quiet. And I told the spirits of the home, I'm letting my guard down. You want to come try to possess me, oppress me, whatever you want to try to do, go for it. I went to my meditation and I started saying some prayers. I was saying the Lord's Prayer. And as I feel this heavy energy coming over me, I start forgetting my prayers. Now, I was raised Roman Catholic. Like, I don't forget the Lord's Prayer. That's something that just doesn't happen. And here in this moment, now it's like I can't find the words. And I could feel something like almost trying to oppress me.
David didn't just start to forget his prayers, but he also began to become filled with doubt. He was questioning his faith, God, and his fellow team members. It was as if all the truths he knew in this world were fading into a pool of uncertainty, suspicion, and mistrust.
And at the same time, I can feel like these creatures, or to me, it was just energy, but it was all around my body. Now, mind you, I'm sitting on the floor, so these had to be small.
At this point, the team knew they were on the right path, and it was time to really ramp up their investigation.
We did a couple EVP sessions after that, and then we started getting evidence. And so we got some audio clips. Some said "get out." Some were inaudible, but just didn't sound very nice. We got called some vulgar names from different spirits, or just one spirit imitating several spirits.
After this, the team went down into the basement and began to pray. David and team member Melissa were reciting St. Michael's Prayer and spiritual warfare prayers. But Chris was affected differently. His prayers felt as though they weren't coming from him, but rather through him.
Not to offend any Pentecostals out there, but I went all Pentecostal to a point where both Dave and Mel stopped and in amazement of I was just spewing out prayers, almost without taking a breath, one prayer after another, boom, 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 boom. And it was making a difference. We could feel the house energy change. At first it was ramping up. You could feel it almost squeezing you, if you will. And then as we just kept going and going and going, the environment was different. And what this did, it just allowed, at least for me, to receive those visions from the entity that was being controlled by the negative one.
After the second investigation, the activity in the house stopped. The clients were delighted and thrilled that they could resume normal life. But they had a part to play in this journey also.
And one of the interventions that we left them with was you have to do one positive act of kindness for each other a day. Just one thing that they don't have to ask you to do, you just do it for each other. And that's just to maintain positivity in the household. If you have to argue, go outside, go, somewhere else and have a conversation, take a drive. Don't bring negativity into the household, because whatever is there is feeding off of it. And for about a month, things were great. And then lo and behold, activity starts ramping up again. And this time a lot worse. Chris knows this, but there's some saying that if you try to exorcise a demon and you invite it back, it comes back with 7 times more?
Sevenfold.
Say it comes back 7-fold. So clearly now something was pissed off and it was back. And of course, well, what changed? Oh, well, we've been arguing a lot in the house. So they did not follow the process and they invited it back.
So the team went back. And this time, the story started to unravel itself, vision by vision. It all started during an EVP session, when the word chalice came bursting through the spirit box. As weird as this word was, it wasn't the first time that Chris had experienced it in relation to this home.
That's when I started getting the visions of what brought us to here, to this point. The woman that came forward, she gave me her name. It was a long name, or it had a lot of syllables. The most I could get out of it was Reg. And so we deemed her Reg. This is the female spirit that was afflicting the house. She was being controlled by this dark entity. She proceeded to tell how she got there. She's telling me her story. She was recently married and her husband wasn't finding favor with her because she wasn't giving him a child. And in her disparity, she reached out to the dark side to get help in becoming pregnant without thinking of the deals that you have to make to get there. This entity that ordered her to kill 2 children, a boy and a girl. One was 2 and one was 3. And she had to pour their blood into the chalice and then drink the blood. Therefore, the dark entity would help her become pregnant. Sitting there, I'm like, this is unbelievable. The environment that they were in, I guess it could happen. I got the sense that they were either from the 13th or the 14th century. It was a long time ago. I felt that they were from, a Scandinavian area of Europe. So I'm kind of putting the puzzle pieces together of why this woman is bothering this family, centuries later. It's crazy. The irony of all of this is through either disease of the time or getting sick from drinking the blood, Reg never lived long enough to bear a child. So she did all this in vain, but the dark entity still wanted the child. He was going to take that child for his own. So this created that unbreakable contract, if you will, between the dark side and Reg.
Through further later investigation, the team learned that the female client had descended from Scandinavian regions, and she was currently suffering a rare blood disease. The picture was beginning to come into focus.
I made a decision prior to our next case that I was going to go on a journey, and that's how I refer to it. I was going to transport myself to where I can get a hold of Reg, because up until this time, our words of trying to convince her, all she has to do is go and ask for forgiveness, and she would be allowed into the gates of heaven, and the activity would decrease, or this dark entity would have no power over her.
Through Chris's meditative journey, he finds himself on a path in the middle of the forest. It's a gloomy setting, with the only light coming from between the leaves of the huge canopy of trees above him. Either side of the path are rows and rows of thick, dense woods. As Chris walks down the narrow footpath, he can see a well in the distance, rising about 3 feet off the ground. He begins the long, slow walk to the well.
And by the time I got to the well, I'm looking, calling for Reg, and she comes out of the path from the right, and I'm beckoning her to come quickly. And then she steps out into the path, and then there's so many more souls, more than I expected to see.
At the sight of all the unexpected souls, Chris begins to feel overwhelmed. He had only expected to find Reg and was not prepared for the masses who came with her. He started to doubt what, if anything, he could do to help these souls. He could still feel his spiritual tether to David in place, so he continued on, determined to help Reg and the others.
But I got the sense that they wanted to go with Reg. They wanted to get out of the control of this dark entity. So I'm beckoning them, come. In a far off distance, I hear heavy footprints. Immediately didn't feel good about it. I thought it was bad. I felt it was bad. And I'm like, all right, now we got to go. We got to go, let's get out of here before whatever's coming gets here. And then the running sound was getting louder, getting closer. You could start feeling the ground shake. And I said, we're out of here. So I jump up on the well. And I don't know why. I thought, okay, let's jump in the well. It's a safe place to be. It makes no logic, right? I'm reaching out to Reg, trying to get her up onto the well. So we're going to jump into the well. We're going to get in the well and we're going to get away. I don't know why I'm thinking this, but I felt like it was safe. The running sound is getting louder and louder. And before I knew it, I have Reg up on the well with me. This entity was huge. As I said, I'm 6'1", I'm standing on a 3-foot well. So that makes me about 9 feet tall. This entity was staring. We were staring at each other eye to eye, and he took a hold of Reg, and he didn't communicate other than growling or grunting. It was, a non-human sound, but I wasn't going to let go of Reg, and he was not going to let go of Reg either.
They were at an impasse, Reg caught in the middle. Eventually, Chris became so terrified he wanted out. On the other end of the tether, David could feel Chris's desire to escape, but he knew that he was strong enough to see it through, so he didn't help pull Chris back into this realm. Chris was trying desperately to pull Reg from the beast so they could go back to the other side, but he was no match for this entity.
He had such a grip that it wasn't going to happen. And the final thing I remember is he just roared. I've seen a lot of things in my life, and rarely things scare me this bad. But it scared me, and I said, that's it, I'm out. I jumped into the well, and then eventually returned back to my team.
As Chris returned and opened his eyes, he realized that the well was actually the physical circle his team was sitting in. He had jumped right back into the company of his fellow investigators.
When I came out, I was never so angry at one person. I trusted you to get me out when I needed to get out. I was so angry. I was crying. I was emotional. I was like, I trusted you. I wanted to get out and you wouldn't let me get out. We joke about it now, but Dave and I, we are good by the next case. But I came out where I just wanted to hurt David. They're not helping me. That's how angry. And for me to want to hurt somebody is pretty significant. But I had the mindset in back that he was an MAA fighter, so I said, nah, I won't do that.
After having such a horrific experience, what is your next step as a team? What do you tell the homeowner? And could you ever bring yourself to enter that house again?
Well, we never went. Or what I told them when they came back is, we're not coming back until you get a priest and until you guys change your dynamics of the house. I was adamant. And I think it was surprising to Mel and Dave when I was explaining everything. We're not coming back because this is unsafe. It's unsafe for my team. I felt responsible to keep them safe.
So where are this family now? Do you have any contact with them?
Yes. So the wife, she still occasionally, maybe every 6 months, will send me a message and, just basically hope you guys are doing well type of thing. And, but she'll always give me the update. And pretty much the original guy from Seattle who got us the case in the first place, he's getting paid to help from Seattle. He's been trying to help them for over 3 years now, easy. And I think if at this point, I think you should realize that you're not helping if it's been this long and you've gotten 0 results. So they're still afflicted to this day.
Do you think that the activity in the house was spurring them on, or that they were spurring the energy on, or do you think it's a little bit of both?
Both. It's like that vicious cycle. You're negative, and then the entity loves that. It likes watching it. It just creates. Then it'll create more. So it might. For example, I remember he called me one time at like 2:30 in the morning, and he's like screaming. He's like, "Do you hear this?" And all I hear is banging on the headboard. And of course, I wasn't there, so I can't see if he was hitting it or something like that. But I heard this very loud banging, and him and his wife were both couldn't sleep. So it would do one thing, make them, they're trying to sleep, they're tired, and then it's keeping them up at night. So then they would start bickering at each other, and then that would turn into something else. So then it creates more negativity. So all it had to do was kind of, cherry pick when to just do one little thing that would set you over the edge at the right time.
It doesn't want you guys separated. They wanted you guys together. That's that's their food source, if you will.
So when you see in Hollywood all these demonic horror movies and things are flying off the walls, it's not like that. It's much more subtle. And this was really one of our first experiences with that.
No one knows what invited this entity into the family's life, but the team all agreed that the negativity, fighting, and constant conflict created the perfect environment for this entity to flourish. The Eastern Connecticut Paranormal Society worked on this case for over a year and a half. And yet, still to this day, it has no resolution. It's the one that got away, and it still haunts Chris and David to this day. The old proverb states, God helps those who help themselves. And until this family are ready to take on the process, this case remains open. Do you have a spooky story you'd like to share? I'd love to hear it. Drop me an email at thewestlondonwitch@gmail.com or find us on Instagram and Facebook at The West London Witch. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. And come and follow us for additional content on Instagram and Facebook. Until next time, merry meet, merry part, and merry meet again. The West London Witch is created by me, Rebecca Strazina. Our sound designer and production magician is the incredible Danny Cross. Our theme music was bespokely written and performed by the wickedly talented Kyle Hall. Our cover art is the beautiful collaboration between Lizzie Wilson and Jake Bowser. Special thanks to Miss Sinead Bowers, our quality control and biggest cheerleader. And thank you to you, all of our listeners all over the world. These are your stories. Thank you for sharing them with us.